All right, so I am continuing with my shape painting here. Just getting kind of the basic structure blocked out with shapes rather than lines. And you can already see how the white background is a bit of a liability. So once we are refining our painting a little bit and getting beyond just the base layer, I'll use a gray background like we did with digital coloring. Also, you can see by stealing the colors from my photo reference, I am getting variations. Instead of just getting blacks and whites, you want to avoid using black and white, and instead use just dark versions of different colors, which you can see here. Now, mostly we'll only use the brush tool, but occasionally what happens when you're doing this is you might end up using the lasso tool just to get sharp edges. Think of how that apple was cut out in the demo slides. And this is a good intro to that, kind of cut around these ears. Okay, so that is the shape sketch. This is the freehand sketch that then I tried to warp, kind of went awry. And this is the rotoscope sketch. Now what if I kind of combine these together a little bit? What if I take my shape sketch and take its opacity down, transform it, and try to warp that, actually I'll first just scale it, into the rotoscope sketch. Because these are all just based on observation of the same reference, right? Free transform it, rotate it, stretch it. Use those compositing skills, and then warp it, kind of nip and tuck it into the right place in certain ways. This can inform my base color. Now the advantage of doing the shape sketch is that it already starts your base painting. Whereas with the linear sketches, you then have to fill in your shapes like a coloring book. Keep not putting that 1 foot far enough. But I'll learn slowly. So now what I can do is I can use that lasso tool on my shape sketch, right? And I can kind of trim it to fit around my rotoscope sketch. So it's got the color, but now I'm just fine-tuning the shapes because it's all about the action of this pose. Now I rotoscoped it, but I also then, if you remember, warped it in order to exaggerate the head size. All right. So trim it. There we go. So now I can put that opacity up, and except for the eyes and the nose, I've got kind of the best of both worlds. So now I'm just going to continue that shape sketch. And I can be informed by the rotoscope underneath it. I can even put the rotoscope on top of it and paint underneath it. So for the eyes, I'll just do kind of a yellowish eyes for now. Right, and the nose, I'll do a pinkish nose for now. Okay. So, lock all of these. Now we get to our base painting. Now the problem with using the default brushes is they look very bland. Right? They look like spray paint. And really the only kind of interesting thing about them is where I cut them with the lasso. Some of the colors are nice, but it's easier to kind of find what you want from a soft shape than from a hard edge shape. So that's why we use that soft pressure size brush. Now we got to learn how to create our own brush. So if I'm actually painting like some of my inspirations, I'm going to save my work, Command S, like Susan Rothenberg, like Helen Frankenthaler, I am going to be using pretty heavy duty brushes with oil paint. They're called bristle brushes. And they have different shapes. So here's a set of bristle brushes you could buy. And there are flat brushes, then there are round brushes, then there are fan brushes. All right? I'm going to do most of mine with probably what's called a filbert brush, which is a slightly rounded square brush. Now if that sounds confusing, let me explain. This is how you're going to make your own brush. Save your work, Command S, but don't close it. Then say File, New, and create a new Photoshop file with your name. And I'm going to call this Karl Brush Afternoon Spring 2025. And I'm going to make it in pixels, not in inches, for the first time. So I'm going to make this file 1,000 pixels by 1,000 pixels. That's how I like to design a brush head. Doesn't matter the resolution because it's 1,000 by 1,000 pixels. Create. Now I have a 1,000 by 1,000 pixel square. All right, so now within this brush, we're going to keep with the brush tool, but we're going to change its opacity to 100%. And in our colors, we're going to choose the default color, so it's the solid black. And we're going to keep our soft round pressure size brush, but we might want to make it a lot smaller because what we're going to be painting here is what the brush looks like if you were to push it straight down into a black ink pad and then stamp it straight down onto a piece of square paper. Right? So if I want a brush, like I said, that acts like this kind of brush, it's called a filbert. It's kind of rounded at the tip, but it's flat on the edge. So that's from the top. This would be from the side. That's the kind of brush I want to make. This one right here. If I want to make that, I have to pretend I take that and I dip it, not even dip it into ink, stamp it against a black ink pad, which leaves an impression on the bristles at the tip, right? And then press that against the piece of paper. So what would that give me? So I'll do this on a new layer. I'll fill it with white. You can just do it all in one layer. I'm just trying to help you understand. So it's going to give me a shape that's roughly like this. A little bit thicker in the middle, a little bit thinner at the edges, but overall like a long oval, right? If it's a rectangular brush like this, the general shape will be kind of rectangular, right? Stamped down. And if it's a round brush like these, the shape will be more circular. So if I'm designing a brush, this is the one I want. I'll do this on a new layer. I don't draw that shape. Instead, I draw the ink on each of the hairs of the brush, like this. And I let them have a lot of variety. And I want to leave quite a bit of space between them. A good brush design has about just as much empty space as it has filled space within the brush profile. So notice my brush design is going to look like that, right, as I'm building it. And I can build 3 separate brushes all from this one file if I want to. So I'm just going to fill this with white so you can see it clearly. So ignore this profile size. That's just kind of my template for what I'm filling up. It's like the fingerprint of the brush. So because a filbert brush is stiff hair, it's done with pig hair, hog's hair, you're going to get short, different size kind of clumps. If you want something to be more like a watercolor brush, you're going to have kind of smoother, more even marks like that from sable hair. But really, you'll just experiment. And it takes some patience, but this is going to all be worth it. Kind of fill up your brush shape. Okay, I'm almost there, getting about 50% of it filled with black. You can also use an eraser. So just to show you, I could also do this, and then I could paint with white and kind of erase it out. Both methods work, but I prefer the positive method. And then brushes will always have some flyaways, some bent hairs that kind of go outside of their purview a little bit. And that's going to help with your blending. Just a few more. Remember, I'm using pressure sensitive, so the harder I press, the bigger the shape is. And I could do that with this and with this, but I'm not going to. Okay, so that's my brush. How do I turn it into a brush that I can use? Pretty simple. I go to Edit, and I go to Define Brush Preset. And as soon as I click that, boom, I have the brush, and the brush is named what I named that file. Now I can use that brush. Boom. Okay, the problem is, when I use that brush, it's like a stamp. So I'll do it on a new layer, show you how the brush works. This is at a really large size. I ended up doing it 650 pixels, right? But if I make it a smaller size, a more usable size, if I start using it, it looks cool, but it looks very digital because everything is exactly locked at the same angle, the same size. So what really matters for brushes is not the individual shape. So if I make it really big, I can even make it bigger than I made it. I can just stamp with it, right? It's not the shape of the brush that matters so much, though it does matter. It's what you do with the brush settings that matters the most. So brush settings you'll find under Window. You can do this to any brush. The brush settings we want to use are just the ones on the top, the shape dynamics. So just like you're doing layer styles, you're going to select shape dynamics and then you're going to set its aspects. This is what I do. I set all the jitters to between 10 and 20%. Just kind of depends how much I want. So size jitter makes it so each time I stamp it, the size is going to vary slightly. Minimum diameter means it's never going to go too small though. Angle jitter means every time I use it, it's at a slightly different angle. So it's kind of like sponge painting right now, right? Roundness jitter just tapers the edges a little bit. Now this still isn't very useful. Though that looks more interesting as a brush, it's still